So our 2009 Subaru Tribeca, turning over but no start. This is going to be a quick reference video, getting feedback for engine RPM. This is where the fuse is located for the fuel pump. Note where the spare fuses are here as well. I'm just going to put my fuse back in after testing it. It is good. I'm going to remove the engine cover, trying not to hit the camera. A really quick tip here on fuel line removal, if you have to. I'm just using some tubing here, like airline tubing. This happens to be 10mm size, 1.5mm thickness. It's a little bit tight, but with the line top and bottom on the fuel fitting, that little line's up top, you need something on each side to push, or maybe a little over half size from the top to push the sides in. I'm sharing this because every tool that I bought for this actually did not work well, or some cases not at all. Subaru has a double ridge, and that makes it where solid tools can't get in there very well, and that's what you're doing, is pushing those little clips in on each side. So the little lines at 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, you need to push on the sides, 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock position, or again go over halfway with your tubing cut and slide in from the top or bottom. You can push both sides at once possibly. But I'll show a quick video here where I tried this more expensive metal tool that would do the job well if it wasn't for that second ridge that's right there. It couldn't make it in past that. The plastic tools, 9 times out of 10 would not work. If you did like I was talking about and put it at the top and let just one half catch both sides, sometimes you would get lucky, and I did catch it on camera here once where it pulled it off, but you will not be able to get both sides in, and it don't always work well. And once, to get me out of a tight, I was able to use the little cut pieces from a large terminal. This is like a 4 or 6 gauge wire terminal, just cutting the nylon sleeve off. And it was a little bit thin, but it did push in there, getting past that first ring. And with a little bit of movement, it would pop off like so. Unfortunately, you're always going to drop them, just about every time, but they do work in a tight. I do want to show here when you push your line back on, and you know you have zero pressure in this line. See how freely it moves back and forth. Now I'm going to start the engine, and you can see when the pressure from the fuel pump pushes back on this line, you can see that it just pushed it back, and it's about 50 psi on the line when it's running normal. And you can actually move it, trying to troubleshoot this. Mine had zero pressure and it was moving back and forth easy when I was having issues, and I was curious of how it needed to feel. You can tell you have hydraulic back pressure, but you can push it forward and it push back like so. And again, this is what it's like with no pressure on the line, and that's how mine was doing with my fuel pump issues. The next thing I want to share with you, it took me a while to find out where the fuel pump relay is to check it, and you do have to remove all this trim. And Subaru Parts Deals had this little diagram on their website that was very helpful. It was the first one I come across that showed me which one was the fuel pump relay and about the area it was located. And you can see here I have an upside down F on one of mine because it was on the right side and flipped the other way. And I swapped mine around to make sure the relay was not the cause. And for me it wasn't, but that's why they're flipped around like that. So again, here's the little diagram if it helps you. So next thing is where's the fuel pump located. So it's up under the back seat, passenger side. I had to use a T50 Torx, and we don't have a lot of stuff that large. This socket is the only thing I had T50, but it's easy. It's 4 bolts. The little plastic covers here, remove them, lift up the carpet, and here is the cover for our fuel pump. The first thing I did was remove this plug and check it for corrosion or any loose connections, dark colors, nothing there. So I did remove the 4 Phillips and the little cover off the seal. And yes, very dirty because this is underneath your vehicle. This is the top of the gas tank. Going to remove this little plug here, and it looks good as well. No obvious corrosion or burn marks. But I want to share with you here, even though I couldn't see it, you see a slight brown mark later on with light from under the fuel pump. Of course, you can't see this in the fuel tank. I am just saying that if I would have looked closer, maybe I could have seen that darkness. So mine was intermittent. Unfortunately, it was hard to catch what was going on with it at times. So one day I'm testing it and mine just starts working. And while it's working, I'm checking and I'm trying to figure out which wires go to what. And it does look like these larger wires will be the ones for your motor, the actual pump motor itself. In the first diagram I found, it looks like the voltage comes straight off the fuel pump relay. I'm kind of wondering why I'm getting 8 volts here in this situation. It is running and I'm getting 8 volts. Like sometimes maybe I wasn't getting good enough voltage to run the pump. That's what I was thinking at this time, but trying to find a good ground. Didn't even know this was a good ground, but I am getting 13.8 volts. So it's looking more like a loose ground at this point. I'm starting to look into why I'm not getting my full voltage to the pump. But apparently this is an older Subaru wiring diagram. And then the more I dig, under hood services was the first search that showed that it does have pulse width modulated fuel pumps on some Subarus. And apparently these are one of the models that does. So this diagram is correct. And also looking through cardyne.com, they had a good selection of wiring diagrams. In the engine electrical system wiring, it does in fact show that we have fuel pump control unit, and our wire numbers do match up. You got to realize this plug is upside down. And going back to Subaru parts deals, it shows us where our fuel control module is, somewhere in the rear quarter panel, but we're getting our voltage, so I don't have trouble with that, but that's just for your information. But again, getting 8 volts on this, it finally makes sense that we have a control module. So it's a PWM output to the DC motor. Another quick thing to point out troubleshooting, when this thing was not working right, you can also take your meter on millivolts DC and read across the fuse, just simply reading the voltage drop. And with a current flowing, you should at least see some millivolts. And for me, with my key on and run, I was getting 0 millivolts when I was getting no fuel pressure. So I could tell I was not getting any current. And to show here in contrast with it running, I'm getting about 17 millivolts. And if I actually take my meter and current measure and just use my meter where the fuse would go, like so, with some terminals, just notice was getting about 5 amps. It drops down to about 3.3 amps. And if I pull it off, this is how long the car run with the fuel pump cutting off. So just as a reference there. So going back to this plug, I don't think I shared exactly which wires it was. So it's your thicker 2 wires in the center. I'm going to show here on a diagram 7 and 12. On that drawing it shows 7 and 12, and it shows green and yellow and green and red going to 5 and 6 on the plug that goes straight into the fuel pump assembly, and all that matches up perfectly. So this diagram right here was very, very helpful and was 100% accurate on mine. So here I catch it not working this day, and I'm getting megohms, like 3 or 4 megohms, and this pump should probably be around 1 to 2 ohms reading. So I got the ignition on, I'm going to voltage, and what am I getting out going to the pump? 9.9 volts, if you can see that. So with a little screwdriver, you can take the clips up and just make sure nothing's going on here with the connection, and my wires look good. And this is in fact going to 5 and 6. This plug is upside down than from what you see on this drawing here. So the way it's plugged in, it is the top 2, that is 5 and 6. And as we mentioned, green and yellow, green and red. And checking, 4 megohms right there on it. So I finally had to pull mine out, and this is where I showed earlier. You can see that brown mark. It wasn't until I got it out that I could actually see this. And I was also having a hard time getting that connector out. So I knew at this point that my issue was on this side of this little bulkhead connector. So see how dark that is and how dark my connection is. So hopefully that'll help you out to know that that's where some of the issue is, probably with a lot of these. And if I check going straight out to the motor, on ohms, I'm getting about 1.2, 1.1, just a little over 1 ohm. So mine needed a new pump. I bought a new gasket as well, but I decided to go with the Delphi Automotive. There's a lot of cheap ones out there that don't have very good reviews, but just checking my fuel sending unit here to make sure it did match, because I had no issues with the fuel sending unit in my old one. This video right here is not about replacing the pump, but just really the troubleshooting issues and trying to help you out in a type if you're trying to troubleshoot yours. I'm showing here with a fuel gauge connected now in line. And there we go, the pressure goes up around 50 psi. And one final note here, with this new one installed and running, I don't know if you can hear that. I think that's the bypassing from the regulator you hear there flowing, but the mic is right up on it there. But you can hear this pump churning, and I think that might be good to know. Even though the original was not as loud while it was running, I will say that. So I will try to have other videos as far as removing and replacing the fuel pump assembly like so, and maybe even a more in-depth troubleshooting. This is just a really quick troubleshooting video to help you out, because it took me many days to actually come up with all this information and figure out what was really going on with mine. If you found the video helpful, please like, share, subscribe. I'll have some links down in the video description of some tools and interesting things that I use on my electronics workbench, as well as some other tools I found helpful with this repair. Thanks for watching, and God bless.